So if you are listening to on YouTube or Facebook, we'll get started shortly once the LinkedIn connection goes through. Not sure why it's taking a little longer than normal, but we're almost there. Okay, it's working now, so we'll get started shortly. Go live. Great. Okay, so here we go. Thank you for your patience, everyone. We're going to get started shortly here. All right. So welcome back to Coach Connect. Here's where we explore the stories and strategies and insights from trailblazers who are transforming the world of coaching and well-being. What drives their success and what fuels their passion for helping others. We're here to uncover their secrets and share them with you. This show is brought to you by Vibely.io, the all-in-one coaching platform designed to empower coaches with tools, resources, and support we need to thrive and help our clients achieve meaningful, long-lasting growth. I'm Dr. Diego Salinas, your guide on this journey. As a neuroscientist, physician, health coach, and co-founder of Vibely, I'm committed to celebrating the incredible work of coaches everywhere and helping them unlock their full potential. So together, let's dive in deep into what makes coaching powerful and a force of change. Our guest today, Laurie Thomeczek, is a Master of Public Health, NBHWC, PMP, and the founder of Health Coach Study Hall. Has been practicing as a health coach since 2018. With a background in public health, learning design, and program management, she brings a practical, evidence-informed approach to exam preparation. Laurie has served as adjunct faculty for 2 NBHWC-approved coach training programs, one corporate and one academia. For the last few years, training and evaluating health coaches for a handful of nationwide digital health platforms. Laurie, welcome to the episode. Thank you so much for having us on, or for being on.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And thanks for those little kind of tech hiccups there, but that's part of going live, right? So, Laurie, as we dive in, just kind of write your brief bio before we talk about the exam preparation. I was curious kind of what got you into helping others, into the coaching field. What led you to kind of, what was the initial part of your journey that got you here today?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think like probably many people in this field, I stumbled into it a little bit, but my interests and passions and formal education has always lied around health and well-being. I studied nutrition and then public health in graduate school. Once upon a time, I supported a food allergy training program. I oversaw the education department of this company, and we had a suite of courses where we trained food service professionals in all different kinds of settings on how to keep diners with food allergies safe. So that's where a lot of my former like program management and learning design experience stemmed from. And then I kind of pivoted after that job and landed as a digital health coach at RVO, which at the time was just called Real Appeal, and really loved, learning about behavior change and coaching psychology and habit formation and all that good stuff. And then kind of realized, at a certain point, as much as I love coaching people one-on-one, I'd really love to be supporting coaches more behind the scene and helping them grow and expand their skill set. So had the opportunity to kind of pivot and support the internal NBHWC approved coach training program there. And then, kind of evolving that into more exam prep offerings and creating study materials that can help students pass this test as well. So it's all been a pretty cool evolution. And I was thinking the other day too, when I was a kid, how they tell you like, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? And that can help you reconnect with passions. If you would have asked me like in kindergarten, I either wanted to be a teacher or a fashion designer. And so as I've thought about that, I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like just this intersection of instructional design and creating learning materials and resources to help educate people. It all kind of blends together. It all kind of makes sense. It connects the dots in that way for me. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, I was sensing the through line of teaching education, that kind of passion there. And I never, I'll be honest, thought about the idea of fashion design, someone who's not very visual myself. I'm a very visual learner, not visually creative, but how important some of that visuals is, or the design element of how you approach learning something can really be an interesting intersection. That's really cool, Laurie. So always been a teacher, always want to help others, and now started helping So you're training students, but I'm guessing you found some sort of gap there between training them and then the next step. So kind of how did you start, or Health Coach Study Hall, and who was this who's designed for when you created this in mind?
hmm Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of different coach training programs that are out there at this point, and there's a wide variety of the amount of exam prep that is offered between programs. Some offer quite a bit, some don't offer much at all. And so for the ones that don't offer much at all, I wanted to really make sure that there was resources that could support those students who need a little extra. But Health Coach Study Hall is an online resource hub, and it provides flexible evidence-based materials for health coaches preparing for the board exam. Everything is designed specifically for busy professionals who want a more efficient and supportive way to prepare for the exam that will build
Mm.
their confidence and reduce overwhelm, and that also fits into their life more seamlessly. So everything I offer is sold individually, and it's all self-guided and really best for those who want to study independently. So you can pick and choose the resources that you want and need and kind of curate your own study experience that's going to work best for you.
Nice. We were talking earlier how I've taken so many exam prep courses and stuff, but usually while I was in high school, in college, in med school, you have all this luxury of free time and, studying for, the whole summer, for example. But you realize a lot of coaches are adult learners. We've already had other careers that are busy. So really adapting to that, saying learning's gonna be different here once you're an adult in the real world versus kind of how a lot of traditional programs are set up.
hmm Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, you mentioned also that self-paced component. So the modular approach is what I'm hearing. Like you don't have to take all of it, but you can really see what are the areas that you want to build strength in, and then focus your time on that, and maybe skip over the ones that you might feel some more confidence or already have under your belt. Is that how I understand it correctly? How you designed it, Lori?
Yeah, for sure. So, some folks might want just a study guide or a study plan. They're like, give me the roadmap. I just need to like organize how I'm going to approach this time. Some people just want practice exams. Some people need a little more content review support. So I have resources that kind of hit on each of those categories, and they're all meant to like work together, or they can stand alone. So again, it's kind of up to you how you want to curate your own experience, and also what works for your budget as well, because that's a big part of it for me too, is having resources that are reasonably affordable. And maybe you don't want or need like a full prep course that has a higher price tag and a higher time commitment. You can just be a little more selective.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's making my brain think a lot of things. As a nerd, I love modularity and building things that stack on each other, can work independently or together.
Mhm.
And thanks for bringing that conversation into the room about the price of this, right? We've just spent a lot of money on coach training programs. We might have been out of a job for a while while doing this, and those pennies start really adding up. And so it's not only allowing people to focus on what they need education wise, but also where they're at and really prioritize their dollar when they're furthest, knowing themselves best. What are their tools they need? Because sometimes, we know with our client work, giving someone a bunch of stuff can be overwhelming, right? We don't start with a client and say, here's the 4 things to do. That's too much to chew off. So this can really be tailor-made in a sense to your own personal needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure everything is, really clear and well structured is important to me too, so that we're reducing overwhelm and, organizing things into a way that is more streamlined for people to approach their study experience.
Mm. That as a person who's the opposite, who's kind of way disorganized, I could see how that could really help with like that calming effect to have a
Mhm.
structure in place, because it could be overwhelming to give you that packet of what to study and not know how to approach that. And
Yeah.
so, Lori, it sounds like you were teaching students. You saw there's a gap there, and like what happens next, and there's a variety, and you want to kind of normalize or level the playing field there. And when you start something, there's a lot of learning happens on the way for our clients too, right? So you've been doing this for a while, right? So this idea in mind. You launched, I think, some point last year, right? So you've been doing this for a year under your belt. I'm kind of curious, you as a teacher, what did you learn? Like this last year, how to prepare for the exam. What was kind of something new for you, something you learned on the way, something that was particularly got challenged?
Mhm. Well, when I first started Health Coach Study Hall and offering exam prep materials, I thought my role was primarily about helping people understand what to study and how to study effectively, because that's my strength is, I'm good at organizing an overwhelming amount of information into clear, logical steps and frameworks. And all of that is absolutely still true. But I think over time, I've realized that preparing for this exam is about readiness and mindset just as much as it is about knowing like all of the required competencies. So really, I think I've gotten to know my customers better and their unique pain points. And most of the coaches I work with and have supported, they're already well trained. The issue isn't necessarily that they don't know the material. Of course, there's going to be some like knowledge gaps they need to fill and, dig into the content a little further. But the issue is that they haven't had to sit for a formal exam in a very long time, or they haven't had to study and operate as a student in a long time. And they haven't had enough recent practice, like pulling information from their brain and recalling what they've learned in training under like timed pressure-filled conditions. So I think my perspective has shifted from not just how do I test to this and how do I write solid practice exam questions, but how do I also help someone access what they've learned when it matters? And how do I help them embrace this attitude of steadiness and self-trust? Because a big piece of success, I think, on this exam or any kind of formal exam is training your mind and your nervous system to really like settle into a place of relaxed concentration. So that's informed some of the updates I've made to my resources this year, but it certainly informed how I now talk about exam prep as well.
As you're mentioning this, Laurie, it feels like a lot of parallels to kind of, I'll be honest, being a coach, right? People think they come in wanting to know more knowledge, more information, but really most of the change that happens because of a mindset shift, right? And of course, there could be knowledge gaps with our clients that we work with, and we fill those gaps, but knowledge is necessary but not sufficient. And an exam preparation is so much more than knowing it. Do you have the endurance to sit down and focus on something for 4 hours as the exam is? Or you're right, most of real life, we can just ping ideas off and always refresh, not have to come in holding a bucket of everything to be there. So really, that's pretty similar to kind of client work, not just focus on the material, but coaching or teaching the whole person. And as someone who's gone through a lot of exams myself, I'm curious, give me like some examples of like how that has shown up. Like what are those mindset things that how you've actually made those changes to apply to your audience needs?
Yeah. So, like I said, the issue is not a lack of knowledge. I think, most people preparing for the NBHWC exam, they've already had a career of some kind. Coaching isn't their first professional identity. It's like an addition to maybe a helping profession they've already been in, or it's a second or third like career pivot. We see people, mid-career professionals coming into this field from all different kinds of backgrounds. They may already have been coaching clients, right? So they already have competence in many areas of their life. They're used to being capable and relied upon, and they have some kind of expertise, and they're used to making decisions and trusting themselves. But then when they sit down to study, when it's really time to like prepare for this exam, I think something weird happens where like there's a shift in identity, right? We kind of shrink, the confidence dips, the self-doubt kind of creeps in a way that maybe it hasn't in a long time. We feel rusty or kind of slow, and it's a vulnerable place to be when you feel like you're not grasping everything yet, or maybe you feel more like a beginner than you have in a long time. So that discomfort is something I really want to name and highlight for people, and just recognize that this is a common experience. It does not mean you're a bad student or that you're a bad coach. It's because you're used to being a competent professional, and now you're being forced back into the student role. And studying and test taking are different skill sets than actual coaching. So
Yes.
it's a mindset and an application pivot that has to be made. Yeah. And I think too, like when you're in student mode in your coach training program, when you're a student in that space, there's probably a little more excitement, or it's more energizing because you're showing up eager to learn and expand your skill set. But then again, when it's time to pivot and okay, it's really time to really study and get serious about passing this test, suddenly you're being evaluated. It's easy to like measure your worth against a test score, or you second guess yourself in different ways. That contrast can really shake people's confidence, even for people who are used to having like some amount of success elsewhere. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Oh, gave me a lot of thoughts and ideas. Yeah, Lori. So, zooming out, going be just learning in general, right? I think if you look at how kids learn versus adults learn, right? I've used this analogy often. People say, well, people know I rollerblade or skate. They say, well, what if you fall when you do this? I'm like, you're definitely going to fall when you do this. You fell, we learn to walk. But 1-year-olds don't stop when they fall. They just like continue. There's not that like, whether it's the ego, whether it's whatever that is, they're used to being competent, just keep on going. But the more it's some of this paradox, the more you learn or competent, the harder it can be a beginner again, whether it's the ego or just not used to that experience. It's almost you forgot. I tell people, listen, when you learn to play piano, you forgot what it was like those first few days. Or like most skaters forget that like initially it's just that beginner mindset. And going from then that plus a group setting to a solo setting, it could feel like, am I the imposter here, right? That imposter syndrome was talking about. And didn't take into account how those can really, worsen that imposterization or imposter syndrome. And then for some people lead to inactivation versus moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very vulnerable. And I think something, most people kind of quietly struggle with, but I really wanted to just like name that and give language to it. So hopefully it helps kind of normalize the experience that so many people feel when they're preparing
Yeah.
for the test.
As you mentioned vulnerable, this is actually just came to mind right now, Lori. When I was supporting med students and junior residents, I used to do a little huddle before the rotation. I would say, "Who here loves learning?" Of course, they're going to raise their hand and say, or wants here to learn, right? So, what's a prerequisite for learning? And I would say, like, well, being open-minded, being flexible and taking suggestions, right? And I would say, actually, the most important prerequisite is not knowing. You have to be ignorant to learn something, ignorant about a topic, not in general, right? And so the kind of normalizing that, the not knowing, the not feeling comfortable, it feeling weird, awkward, is a normal part of the process, not indication of a problem. And that name it to tame it, or kind of again saying this is what's expected, and we can get through that. That could MC be really, really empowering. And I think you brought up another fantastic point of our self-worth being tied to a test score or a number, and here's the reality. If anyone looks at statistics, making an exam is always an imperfect measure of something, right? The more questions you have, the closer you can get to that measure, but it's always an imperfect measure. And even working with the boards in 2024 to up to the standards, we had a statistician in the room, right? He sits in the room. He's a PhD statistician, sits in all the board exams, not only our board, but the cardiology, nephrology. And what he said was, man, you guys have the toughest job because, in some other professions, like, this is the answer. What's diabetes? 6.5, right? He's like, but how do you write a question about presencing or about there? So I think it was really, again, validating to hear someone who sat on all the exams for all these, high level fellowship, postgraduate medical training, saying, you guys in your particular case have the hardest ones to do. And what I wish people heard him say was that, listen, we're testing the knowledge in the exam, but we're not testing your skill set in the exam. We're not seeing you do it. We're only seeing if you understand the concept. And so you could be a good coach and maybe not be the test taker. The rust is there, like you mentioned. You're not used to sitting down for half a day anymore and studying for something. So I think I'm seeing what you're saying, Laurie. It's not just about like, here, learn the blood pressure stuff. It's like, this is the real, what's going to make a difference in you showing up the way you want to show up and being brave enough to do these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to kind of walk the talk. With so many different clients, you're probably going to help them face overwhelming things or stress or, work through different mental barriers. And when we can face our own hard thing or the own intimidating exam, we're naturally building resilience that can only help us to be better coaches too. So I think that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, what a chance to walk the walk. And I think the hard stuff we face, the more we understand our clients. Someone asked me, when a student asked me a few years ago, she's like, how am I be a good coach if I also struggle with X, Y, and Z? Organization, weight. And I go, you'll be a better coach because you realize how hard things actually really are.
Right.
And I think this is another example, right? Your struggles doesn't make you a worse person, it makes you more in tune to the reality of that human condition we're trying to support. And Laurie, so it sounds like this, you mentioned a few things also that I want to go back to, that some of us may have had experience studying when we're in high school or college. Maybe we're professionals now. Things are different in a lot of ways. So what's like how do you view that difference between studying like, student back in when we were in high school and then take us in that professional realm now as adult learners? Like where do you see, or how could you shed some light on that, those differentiations?
Yeah. So preparing like a professional means you're tapping into that confidence and that competence that you've had in other areas of your career, right? It's that grounded energy is where we want to be and where we want to align with. So professionals, they don't try to do everything. They prioritize what's most relevant to the outcome.
Mm,
And so I think exam prep should work in the same way. We want to make sure we're studying in a way that's the best use of our time and our energy and for the outcome of passing the exam. So practically, I think that means we get started by getting organized as best we can. We get all our materials together. We see what we have and how things are laid out, from our course materials. We map out a plan of review that aligns with the NBHWC content outline and all the core competencies we could be tested on. We also ensure that we can speak the language of coaching. There are a lot of coaching terms and, concepts that we just have to be generally familiar with. We have to know what certain coaching skills mean and what they look like in practice. Same with those models and theories. And then, we make sure we're looking at realistic practice exam questions that closely mirror the experience that we're going to be sitting for. I also think training like a professional means active preparation as opposed to passive studying. So it's, especially when you're tired, like tempting to just skim or reread notes and textbooks and maybe study with like the TV on in the background where we're kind of halfway engaged. And if you really want to make the best use of your time, and I know people do because we're all juggling so much, we really want to be intentional and focused with our study time. Even if it's short amounts of time, be all in with what you're doing. Try to eliminate distractions, really engage with the material in front of you, and really use every study session to build understanding and those exam ready skills. I think when we like shrink into student mode, there's a lot of anxiety that comes in that identity or mentality. And so it's easy to resort to those passive methods of studying or even procrastinate and put off studying because we're avoiding like the vulnerable, uncomfy feelings that come with this experience. But that ultimately leads to more stress, right? So we want to replace that with intention, focus, clarity, also having boundaries. And, professionals have boundaries with our inner critic, right? We're human. We're going to have these like moments and thoughts of self-doubt, but like, let's put a stop to it and choose a more supportive mindset. And, like we've talked about, like nothing builds more confidence than facing the hard and intimidating things in our lives head on. And deliberate like exposure to some amount of discomfort and stress can improve your resilience and helps your nervous system adapt as you face it as well. So it's that discomfort. It's not something to fear, but it's a signal for growth. And it means you're going to be expanding your confidence as well. So starting early, studying with intention, all of that is going to help create that sense of relaxed concentration that we want on exam day. And we want our nervous system to be as calm and regulated as possible so that we can focus and think clearly and really be successful on the test.
And I'm thinking that people who take your program, they're learning so much of important coaching skill set. Because while you're saying there, Lori, is like stuff that I remember I've sometimes talked to have done in master coaching series programs. We're saying like this is really concept for like how to face growth, right, as a professional. And so you're applying it to this situation. But if you're taking your exam review that understand this perspective, you're gonna be learning a lot of skill set about you can give this advice to your clients, this kind of knowledge to your clients, right? And I do love that visual. You're right. As a student, I'm thinking like, my backpack is full of stuff. I'm sitting in the library. I got my cup there for 8 hours. I'm doing this, and and it is passive, or like, you're definitely not in control. You're kind of like just trying to deal with the avalanche information. But like how professionals, we have limited time. We go for high yield. I remember med school was a whole thing called high yield study. What's the most effective? And that involves knowing your knowledge gap, but also knowing what's going to make you feel more confident for those days. And that so confidence is success remembered, doing exams and practicing them. I remember for my exams, like the MCAT, it was like, go actually drive to the test center, the day before, drive back, understand where it's so you're not freaking out over parking and those kind of things. And it's really this suite of combination of all these things that make us as prepared as we can be. And I love what you say that fear, that thing, there's a little bit of stress helps us perform, actually, that
Mm.
you stress, right? So it's okay to have some stress. We don't want to go to the point where it's that freezing. But actual max performance happens when we're in that zone where there's a little something aligned.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is kind of gold for anyone who's a coach, because what we're really talking about here is being brave enough to be in that zone of proximal development.
Mhm.
That zone where learning happens. And that only happens if you understand what's your comfortable stretch. Because too far overwhelmed, you're collapsing down. If you're doing it passively, you think you're doing something, but really not actually putting something. So really inviting people that you're working with to say, is this my zone of proximal development? And how do I get to that push and learn from that push? Because resiliency is, falling over less often and get it more often. It's not falling over. It's learning from those fallings.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, and again, like starting early with your studying, doing things incrementally, spacing it out where it's that's gonna fit into your life more easily probably if you're doing like 20, 30-minute blocks of studying as opposed to these like marathon hour-long study sessions. But that's also, like you say, kind of that gentle exposure to the discomfort, like, and then hopefully you're maybe gradually increasing your study time as well to build that mental stamina that we need for the big 4.5-hour test. But um, the microdosing of information is also what helps store it into your long-term memory. Um,
Yeah.
and again, helps create that sense of calm rather than cramming like the week before or taking one practice exam the week before. And then if you don't do well, like, then what? Like, you're out of time. And then you're really stressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love for you to give kind of more kind of insights on like adult learners and learning, because I think you hit something really there that cramming sounds like it's okay. I'll spend 8 hours a day, but first of all, how effective are we at hour 7 or 8? For, but also that learning is more effective actually in repeated doses, right? Reviewing on Monday, reviewing on Tuesday, reviewing on versus like trying to do it all in one area. And I remember from my, from I'm curious through here if you could give some more tips on this for adult learners.
Yep, there's a lag. I'm not sure if you can still hear me. You froze on my end.
Let me pause there. Lori, did I lose you there, or are you
Yeah, you
still
were
hear me?
frozen for a second, but you're back now.
Okay,
Are we good?
that was my internet. It said internet connection issues being
Okay.
live. So let me let me maybe repeat that and start again. Um, you're talking about how different things, how adults should learn approach it differently. And one thing I think, uh, I'll throw one thing I'm thinking. I'm curious your thoughts. Like, it could be so tempting to do that before, but we should actually the night before not be cramming a bunch of stuff or doing a practice exam at 10 p.m. at night. You should prepare beforehand. And that night's more about resting your system. Maybe a few things review here, but like the more you can prepare, have a timeline, the more you can plan it out and make decisions as needed. So kind of curious. That's kind of what's coming to mind for me. But let me know how are you also making this adaptable for us adult learners who are busy, who do have a job already, or tackle, juggling managing their kids' well-being with their their exam prep.
Yeah. Well, I think, adults learn best when information is well organized, when it's intentionally spaced and delivered, and there's like clarity and simplicity with how it's presented. And when it's encouraging you to actively engage with the material. So that's certainly how I've designed and developed the resources that I offer. I think I see coaches who prepare for this exam burn out quickly oftentimes because they're just drowning in notes and videos and PDFs and all the course material without a clear sense of like what actually matters or how it might show up on the exam. Um,
Mm,
and I also see, a lot of exam prep out there that maybe assumes that more content equals better preparation. And there's certainly some coaches and people who maybe want more and want as much information as they can possibly get. Maybe they didn't feel like they were adequately trained in their training program. Maybe they do need more kind of foundational teaching and instruction rather than solely exam prep. Um, but like we've talked about, most coaches are already professionals. They're intelligent. They've been well trained, and they just need to have the kind of what's most necessary. So I think streamlining things, having simple structure and tools to reduce overwhelm is my goal. And what's core to who I am as a person as well is just less is more. I want to focus on
mm,
quality over quantity, and keep things straightforward as much as I can. So, the goal with studying, it's not to have everything memorized to a T. It's to kind of get those foundations in place, make sure you understand the broad strokes, make sure you can speak the language of coaching. You've got to, again, have familiarity with those core coaching skills, those models and theories, and have basic understanding of how those things are applied. And knowing like, what is coaching? What does a coach do? What do we not do? Those foundations are really core to how you're going to approach the exam as well. Because I think when you read an exam question, you first want to make sure you understand what the question is asking, of course, and then assess like what's the best or most appropriate answer choice for this scenario and this client. And then at the highest level, does this answer choice align with the foundations of what is true about coaching and what is true about the role of a coach? So that's your filter, and what can help you like eliminate wrong answer choices pretty quickly. So like if there's an ounce of judgment, or it's assumptive or prescriptive or evaluative, or the coach is giving unsolicited advice, those are answer choices that you can rule out because that's not our
yeah,
goal. Yeah.
yeah. Kind of goes back to well, two threads tying together for me is that being efficient with your time, and what we're studying is so much more this conceptual way of the science of coaching is really a conceptual mindset, right? It's not as again, using the example of endocrinology, where like this number is a normal amount of deciliters per milligram of some molecule, right? And then it is and so that the answers can be applied to situations. And I remember when I took the board exam, something came for me. I was like, well, I would probably do all three in a session, but what is this question asking me? What's the next most likely or most important? And I think if I didn't have that mindset, or that, kind of saying, if you can really understand conceptually there, understand what it's rooted in, if you follow those principles, that can help you on the spot navigate that question. Because it's
Mhm.
not like there are those handful of questions that are like, just know the number of normal blood pressure. All right, those are the number of 120 or you don't. But a lot of them, the vast majority, are understanding how you'd approach it. And that's not a one answer thing. It's the conceptual. So you're saying if you can kind of root down to what's the goal here, that will, and lean on that when you feel nervous, that's your solution. That's your way to work through that question.
Mhm. Yeah, right. Yeah, there's common question stems that I think we see on the board exam, or in my own experience, and hearing from others who have taken it over the years. They like to ask, what's the next best step for the coach to take, or what's the best coach response, right? So it's kind of getting back to textbook coaching, right? In your real coaching practice, there are a variety of avenues you can take, and there's not necessarily one right way to do things. Many different, approaches could be effective, but for this exam, it's testing context and application of these skills. And do you know, by definition, kind of what the most appropriate thing would be, or most effective thing would be to do?
Yeah. I'm curious, like, whether harping back to all the exams that I've taken in my life, and part of it, the exam preparation is, you're right, that like mental understanding your mindset, like preparing for when you don't know a question on the exam. I remember, like, okay, if you don't know it, what's my strategy? Notice that, don't freak out, mark it. I'm curious, what are the kind of practical, like, study skills or maybe exam prep skills? Like, I don't get to kind of blend together. Anything else? Like, you've given a lot of great ideas and insights. Anything else, Laurie, for like practical study skills for those about to prepare for this exam, or sit for this kind of different way of approaching, again, these art of the science questions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one big thing is like take a practice exam early in your study journey and kind of get a baseline, see how you score at the beginning of your studying. And that's going to also help reveal gaps in your knowledge and certain competencies or content categories that maybe you need to go back and review more thoroughly. You always also want to practice with realistic timing for this 4.5 hour test, so to absorb information into your long-term memory and what's best for knowledge retention is, like we talked about, study incrementally, study progressively, but also make sure you're preparing to build that mental stamina to sit for this 4.5 hour test. It is a mental marathon. You have to be able to focus for a long time. So take a practice exam for time as well and get used to the timing and pacing. For the 4.5 hour test, in order to finish it all on time, you have a max of 1 minute and 30 seconds per question. And so I recommend a pace of about 1 minute per question is a good place to be. So you'll have a little time left over. If there were answer choices you flagged that you want to make sure you go back and kind of rethink or revisit, you have that time and space to do it. So as you're reviewing questions, like set a timer for 1 minute to see how that feels and get used to that amount of time. And I think most of the time, you'll find that it's more than enough time you need to answer most questions. But that pacing is going to be important for exam day.
Yeah, it's kind of like the dress rehearsal, right? Kind of to be able to really sit down for 4 hours. Like, I'm always thinking, make sure you bring a sweater. They're always very cold exam rooms that you don't want to be shivering, distracting you, right? Knowing what your body needs metabolically. Do you need to have certain trail mix in your locker or something, and have that there? And the more, just like athletes on the Olympics, the more you can practice beforehand, normal is that, the more comfortable you'll be in there, right? I was saying, drive to the place if it's going to be a center. You've mentioned, Laurie, kind of this idea of adults learn differently in really high yield learning, right? Like focusing on your needs and whether it's knowledge based and also preparing for situational experience of sitting for that time. I'm just gonna throw devil's advocate. People say, "Well, Laurie, sounds great and all, but I'm a busy mom and I have 2 kids and I'm doing this. Like, I only got a little amount of time. I don't know if this is possible, right?" How would you what would you say to some coach who says, "Yeah, it sounds great in theory, but I'm pretty limited. What can I do in time? Where should I focus?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think being limited on time, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And, because like we've talked about, the short bursts of studying can be super effective over time. And so it doesn't mean that you can't be successful by any means. But, a similar question I get asked is, if I'm, only going to buy like one of your materials, what should I get? And so I always recommend the full length practice exam, because like this is the test you're preparing for. You want to simulate that experience as closely as possible. So it's closely going to mirror like the real thing that you're doing with the style and of questions and timing and pacing and all that. So yeah, like I just spoke to, take a practice exam early to notice your gaps, and that's going to help reveal like where you need to spend more time studying and digging into certain concepts or competencies. In addition to that, like the NBHWC content outline is always going to be your roadmap for studying. And so I think everyone should take time to like read that early on and really digest it as best they can. That's your source of truth, right? That you're not necessarily going to be tested on every single competency in there, but any of it is fair game. You could be tested on anything. And
Right.
the way that they've divided up the content categories, the distribution on the exam is fairly equal. There's not one category that far outweighs the others. So I think they're looking for well-roundedness. I think that's how this exam will meet you. They want to see that you're well-rounded. And so digest that content outline and, flag or make note of competencies or terms within it that you're unfamiliar with, or you're like, I don't remember learning that. I need to go, research a little more or find out more about what this is. Make note of those things. And that's also going to kind of point you to where you need to fill in your knowledge gaps. And then lastly, kind of the overview paragraphs within that content outline also give a good foundation for how the exam thinks about coaching, how the NBHWC thinks about coaching and the language of coaching. And so that can also reinforce, like, this is the mindset you need to use to evaluate every question. So read that early. And then I would also say reread it like the night before the exam is something I also always recommend.
Yeah. So I do like to do an exam first, because that's going to show you a lot, not only where my knowledge is might be, but also how are you that condition or that endurance sport of sitting down for 4 hours. Since you learn a lot about yourself in both those categories. And it could be tempting when you're reviewing to kind of want to look at everything and skim through it all, but saying this will really help you focus first on the things that you know the least about. Mm-hmm. Right. If like that, sure, you may not know 100% every single category, but if you're 80% here, maybe focus on the one that you feel just absolute that's going to help you be a more well-rounded coach than saying, I know a lot of one category. And sometimes it's kind of nice to review what you already know, but really focus using that as data, the exam as data to say, where should I focus, and really lasering on that as priority one. And then kind of working it down as you may have more time.
Yeah, certainly. And I just lost my train of thought. There was something I was going to say, but I have a different point. As you're doing like an exam or practice exam for time, make note of your own mental drift as well. Like, at what point do you get distracted? At what point do you lose focus? Maybe that's after 10 questions. Maybe that's after 50 questions. Like, where are you at with that mental stamina? And just noticing that early on too can be important. If there's like a simple physical cue you can do when you hit that drift, like, okay, my mind's wandering, I'm going to take a deep breath, or I'm going to roll my shoulders back, or, blink really big, like whatever the cue is can just kind of help you like reset in the moment. And also, I think mentally thinking about the big 150 question test in terms of like it's 10 sets of 15 questions, or, chunking it up that way can also just help you face it easier, I guess. I'm going to do these 10 questions, and then I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to reset. Okay, now I'm going to face the next 10, and then I'm going to face the next 10. So just kind of, mentally helps you face the big mountain, I think, a little easier.
Yeah, I really like both those concepts. And the first one is kind of, again, go back to what we talked to clients as coaches, right? That awareness, sometimes awareness is hard, right? So let's call it out. Like when our clients come to us as coaches, the first part is increase awareness, but it's not always easy. You're aware of how little you are sleeping, how much you're not taking care of yourself. You can be aware of, oh my God, I'm drifting for only 10 questions. And instead of that awareness causing anxiety, remember, awareness is what's necessary to start enacting change. So to celebrate that awareness, I've noticed it's 15 questions. And that's where you can start exploring what is that reset. And I think it's definitely really important. You mentioned, 10 questions, little reset, that really each question is weighted exactly the same and they're not dependent on each other. So if you have a really hard question, like, all right, it's worth exactly the same amount of points as a super easy question for you. And a lot of test taking strategy is letting go of that to be able to refocus your attention, in a sense, like you're constantly task switching, your mind switching on what's the area of focus, the question here, right? So I think that is a really good practice in general, because you are going to face even if you study, there can be questions that you're like, oh, I don't know it. And then if you don't know the first three, well, maybe just take the whole 150. Maybe just the first three were a little hard for you. So that ability to reset and refocus, and actually studying and preparing, acknowledging it's going to happen. What do I do when it happens versus like, I hope I don't freak out on the exam, or I hope I don't feel more stressed. Like, it's going to happen. Let's prepare for that. Laurie, I think you and I could talk for a good while about a bunch of kind of more strategies and ideas, but I do want to be mindful of time. Maybe we can start winding down. Like, if you could give people, I don't know, maybe what's most high yield, or we just need to talk about now, or like, what's the big takeaway? If you like, what do you really want people to think about when they're sitting down to prepare for the exam? If they could take one or two gold nuggets from this conversation.
Yeah, I think I want coaches to know that feeling nervous is completely normal. Big formal exams of any kind are inherently intimidating. So it's normal to feel nerves or overwhelmed by this experience, but you do have what it takes to succeed. And with the right kind of preparation that's focused and intentional, and that emulates the real experience that you're preparing for, your confidence will naturally build. And I think a lot of coaches do really well with self-guided resources that allow flexibility with their work and life and all the other responsibilities that they're carrying. So finding study tools and strategies that let you practice intentionally and build your pacing and focus over time is super important. And I can't reinforce enough, I guess, how important it is to start studying as early as possible. I would say at least 8 weeks out from your exam date. Make sure you're building some kind of study routine where you're consistently reviewing material and memorizing those health and wellness biometrics, all those numbers you need to just know from memory for this test, and regularly reviewing exam questions is super important. And with that slow, steady prep, you're going to train your nervous system and your body to feel more in control when you show up for the real thing.
So well said. Yeah, we're training our mind and our nervous system, right? It's both of those. I had a flashback to med school or residency. Everyone had these little flashcards always in their back pocket because you're always looking for something. All right, you're 10 minutes in call, and you kind of going through things. And if I can add to that too, Laurie, I know I asked a question, but I'm going to add something that would inspire me to say is that this is not indicative of your self-worth, who you are, your potential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I think that's could be such a crushing feel. Like, oh, we do all this stuff. This is not what it is. You can be an amazing coach, have a hard time test taking. But it is helpful to show people you did the homework and willing to go through those steps. Mm-hmm. So if we can decouple this from our self-worth, but just saying it's part of the learning process. And if it is hard the first time, you can be easier the second time. So our clients do it, right? So I really wish coaches could understand the limitations of test taking. Mm-hmm. Also see why we have it. It helps show a profession is unified. It's not just people with a webcam giving advice, right? We do have a shared value and knowledge base. So take it that is helpful. The more people who are in an organization, the more leverage we can have, the bigger impact the community can have. So doing that work of almost taking it for the advocacy of what the profession can do. But don't confuse that this is an indication of your value, your self-worth, or your potential. I think it's something I wish people could keep in mind during this experience.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. And if anybody listening is preparing for the exam this year, if you have questions or just needs any extra support, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to chat or point you in the right direction for materials that could be most supportive to you. And I did remember what I was trying to think of saying earlier too, just with actively preparing, making the most of your study time, talk about the models and theories, talk about these core coaching skills that you're learning. If you can summarize it on your own by sharing it with somebody else, or even writing out summaries from memory of, what you've been studying and learning, that's only going to help solidify it in your brain more. So that's what I mean by active preparation. And also like flashcards and self-testing, trying to pull from your own memory before you reveal an answer is going to be most effective.
Yeah. And let me think here as teacher here. I think one thing I love about teaching, and when I really discovered I loved it, was in college when I was going to give a lecture on brain computer interface for some high school students. And while preparing, I realized, oh, there's so much knowledge I had. I thought I understood it from reading the lectures and going to class, but it was my turn to teach it. I realized where things might be less clear. And so, having us, someone that you can explain this to, your household, your friends or family or someone else in your class, right? Can you guys, if you're able to output it, that can help illuminate any potential gaps and strengthen those. I love that approach. Laurie, I know you mentioned it, but I want to close off by asking, I'm also getting the feeling that you mentioned you have different things that you offer that people aren't sure they can ask you, and you can help guide them what's the best approach to do this. So, Laurie, where can people who want to talk to you more, find out more about you or Health Coach Study Hall, where can they go to have those conversations or learn more?
Yeah, so healthcoachstudyhall.com is the website for my exam study materials. If you're interested in that, you can reach me through email, Laurie@healthcoachstudyhall.com, or I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So people can reach out to me that way. Happy to connect through, messaging there, or we can always set up a call to chat if you need any personalized support too.
Awesome. And Laurie is very responsive, much more than I'm trying to get to your level, Laurie, of responsiveness. So she really is available, and the real deal really is caring. Laurie, I want to say thank you, not for this episode, but providing extra resources for our community to help really elevate the field, the profession, people's confidence, and be able to serve others. So really happy to have you on, highlight what you're doing. We have some more ideas we've talked about before kind of coming up in the pipeline, but really just happy to have you in the community supporting others. And Laurie knows where to find her stuff. Please reach out to her. She is the real deal and is as caring as she seems. So don't be shy. If you need it, I think this is a good point you mentioned early in the episode, Laurie. Being a solopreneur, being by yourself, there's this kind of fallacy we got to do it all ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true, right? Like there's no such thing as self-made. There's people, the resources in your community, people you help out with. So just because people see you as a face of your solo company, your solo practice, doesn't mean you have a lot of support to get there. And it's a sign of strength to use your tools and resources, including those in your community and those in your network. It's not a sign of weakness to ask for help. It's a sign of actual strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a behind the scenes person, but I'm more introverted by nature, but I'm absolutely available and want people to, hit me up if you need help or support. I'm very open to, having one-on-one conversations is where I thrive for sure.
If I could disclose, Laura, I think this is exactly what I'm saying. You're the real deal. Like her comfort is not necessarily in live things and doing stuff, but she went out of her comfort zone to be here on the podcast today, right? So she practices what she preaches, and that's what we all as coaches should do. We're always growing, developing something. How can we help each other and continue that self-growth in parallel? So thanks for your doing, Laurie. Thanks for, hopefully this is helpful for your zone of proximal development, for being so brave enough to be here, and looking forward to more conversations. Have a great afternoon, everyone listening, and we'll see you for the next episode. Take care.